4, 3, 2, 1. Buckle your seatbelt. Batten down the hatches. Coming to you live from the Blazar Podcast Studios in Space City, Texas. It's time once again for the Capital Catalyst Show, the podcast for entrepreneurs to learn the secrets of attracting, raising, and closing capital from high net worth investors. Dedicated to your success, this is the Capital Catalyst Show. Now here's your host, Brad Blazar.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Brad Blazar, your host once again for the Capital Catalyst Show, where it's all about raising money from individual investors, using OPM to build and leverage your wealth, and more importantly, just understanding how to be doing something bigger in life. It's my belief everybody wants to do something bigger in life, but it also comes down to one thing. For most people, that's just a lack of money. And so we're here today on the Capital Catalyst Show to solve that problem. With me, I have a phenomenal guest. I won't tell a little bit about her before we bring her on, but she is the founder of a company called Vi Funds, which really offers unique commercial real estate investments to individuals. She brings a dynamic background, having basically graduated from the University of Illinois at the age of 20 with a degree in finance, and with a passion and an understanding of real estate, got into the real estate game. Veena Jetti has over a decade of real estate experience, where her and her team have transacted over $900 million in real estate, and today own and operate close to $500 million. Veena, welcome to the Capital Catalyst Show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this. This is like my favorite subject ever.
I know it is. Every time I see you and you're talking about real estate and even the nuances like cost seg and CapEx, you're just so passionate about like all aspects of the business.
I am. But like my favorite one thing I do in the business is raising capital.
Yep.
I love it. I just love it. And, every time you and I see each other, this is all we geek out about.
That's because we both are very, very good at it.
Yeah.
I want to go back, obviously, to when you were a much younger version of Veena Jetti. Mm-hmm. You went to school, obviously, studying finance. That's what I graduated with as well. But you got started in real estate at a relatively young age. Like most people don't jump in until much later in life, where they realize, maybe I'm not going to have the retirement I planned on, and I'm needing another, quote, solution to kind of, make up for lost time. But what was it that really just attracted you to the real estate space?
So I come from a real estate family. My mom is a really successful real estate investor, but she always only invested in single family. And, I'm the daughter of 2 immigrants. So my parents came here with $26, like every other immigrant story, right?
Yeah.
And they really built everything from the ground up, and they retired early as millionaires because of real estate. That was a secret weapon that they discovered very early on. And so my family's been investing in real estate for 30 plus years. And I had the good fortune of my mom being, my dad traveled 45 weeks out of the year.
Okay.
So my mom was like a de facto single parent, or the solo child care giver at that time, right? And so when my sister and I were young, my mom would be going to like walkthroughs, and she'd be, going to like closings, and she would have to take us. And I remember when we were very young, we'd be like sitting under the conference table at the escrow office waiting for her to close. And we'd be like, Mom, are we done yet? And, I'm an old lady, so there were no iPads back then, like you just went and you took like crayons and paper, and like that was it. But I think that really gave me, unknowingly, it gave me a foundation in real estate. And, I graduated when I was 20 with my degree in finance.
Yep.
And my mom was like, all right, now you can like come work for the family business. I was like, I'm an adult with a degree. I am not going to do that. Right. And so I went and I worked for some of the biggest real estate conglomerates in the world. And I left Tishman Speyer in 2012. What ultimately led me to leave there and start my own company was I paid taxes married for the first time. And I called my mom up. I remember saying like, Mom, what just happened? We paid like a couple $100,000 in taxes.
Wow.
And I was like, this is crazy. We worked so hard. She's like, yeah, welcome to tax efficiency. She's like, you need to leave your W-2 and you need to start investing for yourself, become a full-time real estate professional. And that's where really I discovered the power of real estate.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that because so many people, as we all know, banged Donald Trump on the head, hey, he's not showing his taxes. And he's like, look, I don't pay much in taxes. And people just really didn't take kind of that. But he understands the tax code and he certainly uses it to his advantage. I certainly don't blame him. He's a smart guy. But you're absolutely right. Real estate is truly one of the best ways for business owners and entrepreneurs and even, of course, working stiffs to really dramatically reduce their taxes. We'll talk about that a little bit later for obvious reasons. But, when you got started, did you jump right into multifamily or did you start, doing something else and then slowly ascend up to where you are today?
I wish I would have started directly in multifamily. I just didn't know what I didn't know. Like I really thought real estate at this level in multifamily in the commercial side was for like Oprah and Bill Gates. I didn't think that people like me could invest in multifamily, which also really grinds my gears now knowing what I do because nobody ever tried to raise capital from me and we were accredited. Like, why did you ask me for money? At least you could have told me that this world existed, but I just didn't know. So I started in single family. I started investing in single family. I bought 5 houses in 1 week and was like, wow, I really hate this. And 2, this is not even remotely scalable.
Yeah.
And so I was like, there's got to be a better way. But what I love about residential real estate is even in a recession, people need places to live. I knew we could make impacts on communities. And that was really important to me. And so I loved that about the residential side. But I could not get past the idea that I have to find 5 houses a week to get to 500 doors a year.
Right.
It's not sustainable and not at the level I wanted to play at. And so that's where I discovered the power of multifamily, which gives you the best of both worlds, right? You still have the residential aspect at the commercial scale.
I love it. I love it. I talk to so many people that want to get in the multifamily game and they're held back. And really, I think it's the fear of like, how in the world am I going to manage 80 tenants, everybody, all these checks and all these headaches. And I'm like, you don't really deal with that. That's what the property management company is going to do for you. Let them take care of the headaches. But you bring up a really good point because much like you, I started in single family, got to the point where I had about 20 different properties and, they're all over the Houston area because I'm in Houston and I was just wasting a lot of time, sometimes driving 2 hours just between properties to meet contractors, to meet landscapers. And finally got to a point where I just took a piece of paper and I basically typed up landscaper, plumber, electrician, and I put it on the inside of a cabinet. And when I was basically bringing a new tenant in, I said, look, I collect rent. Any problems, you call these guys. I do not want my phone to ring. And it simplified my life because now I was giving my tenants access to all my contractors. But like you, I realized it was not a scalable model. And so as we started selling out of our single families, we started, of course, taking advantage of the 1031 strategy, moving that money in initially as LPs on some transactions and eventually graduating to GPs ourselves, which is where we are now as a fund manager. When you started as a multifamily investor, did you do through one of the coaching programs, that are out there? Did you sign up and learn and get the knowledge, or did you just jump in both feet?
I did not. I have never paid for a mentorship or like a networking or paid mastermind. And I always say this is easily, if I had to point to one mistake that I made, this is the one mistake I made. I'm convinced it has cost me tens of millions of dollars doing it the way I did it. And, so I tell people when they ask me, like, do I need mentorship? Do I need coaching? I'm like technically no, right? Because I did it without that.
Right.
But if you want the easy button and you want the fast button, this is absolutely the way to do it. And the mistake I really made, though, was I always thought that behind these paywalls, right? It was like, what is NOI? What is a T12? And I'm like, I don't really need to pay you whatever amount of money to learn that. I can Google that for free, right? I can go to Google University, find all the information. Now that I've earned my way into these rooms, what I realized is I'm the biggest idiot on the face of the planet because that wasn't the purpose of those rooms. It wasn't for that knowledge. It was, I was thinking so much of it like college where you go to class, you learn something and then you walk away. That's not what it is. It's a mindset, right? Being around people who have taken such massive action to invest in themselves and bettering themselves in their lives, right? Like try telling a person at the grocery store that you're going to have $1 billion in transaction volume in less than 10 years. They're going to be like, yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, right.
Tell someone that in a paid coaching program, paid mentorship, paid networking in the VIP section of a real estate conference. They're going to be like, great, how can I help you get there? Right?
Yep.
Different conversation. So it's one, it's a mindset. Two, it's your partners are there. Those are the people that you want to be partnering with because they're also trying to take massive action and change their lives.
Right.
And so you want to partner with those people. It also is a Rolodex. Like when you're in these rooms, right? Like we were just talking before the show about what I need help with and what you need help with. And now I know that I can access anybody that's in your Rolodex. You can access anybody in mine because we've met at a very intimate networking event. Right. And so I never realized that that's really the power of these paywalls is to separate the people that are like the looky-loos from the people that are actually going to take action. And that's why it's so important to have those. And I'm sure there's like plenty of footage of me out there being like, no, you don't have to do these programs. And you don't, but that's the slow scenic route. That is not the fast or easy button.
You know, you brought up a really good point that a lot of people overlook in the coaching world. And, you know, I see you, of course, you know, Pace Morby and all these guys now that you've been with. It's that once you hire a coach or you build that relationship with somebody, even if it's through a podcast, you immediately get access to everybody now in their network. And, you know, people go to my website and they see me, you know, on stage with people like Floyd Mayweather, you know, John Maxwell, Brandon Dawson, Tanks, Kevin Harrington. And they say, well, what benefits am I going to get if I hire you as my coach? I'm like, you want to meet Brandon Dawson? You want me to call and introduce you to Shark Tank's Kevin Harrington? If you got a great product you're trying to put on the shelves, you want me to, you know, get you in touch with John Maxwell if you're trying to become a published author and learn how to get on stages. And they're just like, how did you meet all of these people? And it's like by getting in the right rooms. It's proximity is power. And once I meet somebody, I typically say, you know, how can I help you? Like who in my network can I introduce you to? It's always lead with value first before you ask. But it's largely also just being intentional. You know, John Maxwell, who's become a good mentor, said, look, you know, moving forward in life and getting the life you deserve is really all about intention. The biggest and saddest thing, unfortunately, for a lot of people is they just sit back and they take whatever life throws their way and it just dumps shit in their lap. Yeah. And you have to realize that you have to pursue the life you desire. It just does not happen. And the way it happens, like you said, is getting in the right rooms, getting access to the right coaches, and really just thinking bigger so that you allow your negative thoughts to get out of your way. And you start realizing that that person was born no gifted than me. You know, it's just they've taken massive action in their lives. And I totally love that.
Absolutely.
Now, you know, on the Capital Catalyst show, which is really about OPM, using other people's money to build and create legacy wealth, we talk about the different techniques and strategies that people use sometimes to raise the capital for deals. Is there one or perhaps two strategies that you guys are largely focused on in raising your capital? Or I'm assuming because you've done 900 million in transactions, you've probably tried a lot of things. Some that have not. But like, what's your single go-to thing that you guys do when you need to raise a lot of money?
So first and foremost, we also raise under the 506C exemption now. We used to be on the 506Bs when we were maybe first starting out. Now we do 506C raises. So for us, we have a whole world of new investors that we can be bringing into our ecosystem because of the nature of the exemption we rely on. But one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of new investors making, and this is something we learned, you know, tried and true, is people will wait till they have a deal to go out and raise their capital and get their capital lined up. It's too late. It's too late. If you have a deal on the table, you cannot go out and raise $50 million. It's too much to go and try to build those relationships. This is a relationship game, right? People invest with people they know, like, and trust. And so what we do, and we've been doing this for a while now because we could quickly realize that we don't have enough runway with how fast real estate moves to go and raise these chunks of money once we need the money. So now what we do is we go and raise the money, you know, in quotes, because we don't necessarily take it in, but we get soft commitments lined up. We get people excited and interested. I have everyone, by the time I release a specific deal, they have already vetted Vive Funds. They've already vetted Veena Jetti. They've already vetted the multifamily strategy. They've already vetted our buy box. our criteria. All they're looking at when the deal comes out then is that specific deal.
Right.
And then they're going to say yes or no to that deal because they've already said yes to all the other things and all of the alignment is there outside of the deal specific. So I think that that's something a lot of new investors, including myself, when I first started, I made the mistake of waiting for a deal because I was like, how can I talk about a deal if I don't have a deal? This makes no sense. You talk about your strategy, what you're targeting, what you're looking for. You can put together a corporate brochure and send that out, and it can look really nice and beautiful. And so you can build your brand without having to worry about having the deal specifics nailed down yet. Now, of course, don't take in the capital until you talk to your securities attorney, get your PPMs and all of your documents lined up. But you can definitely be lining up the soft commitments or the excitement way before you ever have a deal on the table.
Yeah, that is a golden nugget right there, everybody. I would literally push the rewind and listen to that again because it's spot on 100%. Because, the big challenge for so many people that are getting it started is you have a deal, like she's saying, you're under contract. The seller, expects you to close, typically 60 days. And as you're getting closer to that deadline and you realize you're falling short, you have two options. One is to go to the broker and seller and ask for an extension. Usually that requires putting up more earnest money. So now you're putting up more capital at risk. The other is to get a bridge and just close the damn deal and then backfill it with investors. I don't recommend doing that. But, like Veena said, you always want to be building the brand, always want to be having conversations with investors, getting those soft commitments. Even if you're a fund manager and you take the fund approach, the fund essentially now replaces the deal. You see, typically there's one of two approaches. You're either syndicating a single identified asset or you've got a fund. Well, the fund is essentially the story now. Now you can tell people, hey, we got a fund. It's going to pay us 7% a month or a quarter. We're targeting distributions of 14 to 16%. And they can write a check, goes into the bank account, and people say, well, what happens if I don't have a deal? Like, how are they going to get a distribution the next month or the next quarter? And here's a secret a lot of people don't know. The biggest real estate companies on Wall Street that do that, they return capital to the investors for the first few months until they buy that first property. And so at the end of the year, the tax statement the investor gets is this was money you got back, funds from operations. This other small amount in the earlier months was just a return of capital until that spigot opened up. We started basically collecting rental income and were able to pay that out to you. And so I tell people, most investors are looking for cash flow. The faster you can give it to them, the happier they're going to be.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right. I'm always talking about the company, what we do, getting soft commitments. And then once I have a deal, we can raise that capital very quickly. Now, are you hosting investor meetups and events? Or are you largely using social media? Like what media or medium has been working best on your capital raises?
I'm so bad at this. I'm like the person you should definitely not ask about like hosting events or social media. This is like something it's not my strength. So I have to have people constantly like pushing me to do things like this. Now, as far as events go, I don't host any events. I mostly like piggyback off of other people's events and I'll show up and I'll hang out. And really, I try to serve their communities. But I speak on a lot of stages. I, travel to a lot of events, speak there, and I spend my time in the hallways, in the VIP. I'd like to get to know the people there. And I spend a lot of time doing that. One, because if people pay to be in a VIP, those are the people I want to be around because they've invested in that, right? Yeah. Like those are people I want to help. I want to do business with because I know they're there because they really want to be there. They're committed. They're dedicated to being there. But also as far as social media goes, I do post on social media. I do a lot of educational content on social media. I have, my Facebook community that I started, and that's really a community. It's not just like a group where, everyone comes to like spam you with deals and like, no, that's not what it is. It's a community. Right. People help each other there. We help each other get better and grow, and people partner there. It's called Mastering Multifamily with Veena Jetti. If anyone wants to join, they're welcome to. It's a free community to join, but I do a lot of education in there, and I do a lot of investor education there as well. So I truly believe a rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah. And I think that when you are better, I'm better for it. And so I think it's good for all of us to help each other.
I love that. That's fantastic. You obviously have been hugely successful in the multifamily space. When you made the decision to get in that, was there a reason you moved into multifamily? Perhaps rather than some other sector in commercial real estate, like, storage or something else? What was it about multifamily that initially pulled you in?
Yeah, it was the scale combined with still the residential aspect for me. I love the idea that we can go in and we can revitalize communities and we can
Yes.
invest into communities. These are people's homes. They care about them. And I love getting responses from tenants that are saying like, hey, I love living here. It makes me so happy. I referred my cousin to live here because I've had such a good experience here. That for me is really important.
Gotcha. Absolutely. I always tell people the reason you're basically hiring a coach is you're basically leveraging all the mistakes they made and learning
Yes.
from theirs,
Yes.
so that you don't make them yourself.
Yes. 100%.
In your
Yes.
journey, so in your journey, Veena, what are maybe one or two of the biggest mistakes you've made? But more importantly, what have you learned from them that you won't do again?
So many mistakes. We could be here for days and days and days if I were going to tell you all the mistakes I made. Well, I told you the biggest one I made, the most expensive one I made, which is not having hired a coach or not getting into these like paywalls that I really needed to be in. And I just didn't know I needed to be in them. So that's like the first biggest mistake. Other than that, I would say, find good partners, right? Because I think anybody who's been in business long enough has had bad partners, has had partners that are not in alignment, or maybe you were in alignment and you kind of got out of alignment quickly. And so you stayed because it was comfortable, but it really limited you and held you back because there was no alignment with just the goal, the mindset, everything like that, the work ethic, right? And so inevitably we outgrow partnerships. And when you're first starting, especially, that happens so much more rapidly than when you kind of are at a higher level of operation, because there's just fewer options at higher levels of operation, right? There's 5 people you can work with when you are Jeff Bezos, right? But when you're first starting out, there's thousands of people you can work with because everybody's kind of starting out. Your bar is lower. You don't know what you don't know yet. So I think like making good decisions with partnerships is something that I've learned. I'm very slow to move forward with partnerships now. I'm not hasty. I make sure everything is in writing and it's clear, because I think, again, when you've been in business long enough, everybody's spent plenty of money learning that litigators are far more expensive than contract attorneys. So spend the money up front on the contract attorney. The litigator is way more expensive and way more stressful. It is just unnecessary. And then building like a power team, right? I didn't realize that I needed the power team early on. And I think this maybe goes hand in hand with being in those right rooms. Someone would have told me years and years and years ago, like, okay, you need this attorney, you need this tax person, you need this consultant, you need this cost seg specialist, you need, all these people. They would have handed me their team, like a public adjuster. I didn't have a public adjuster on my team till like 5 years ago. This is crazy to me. Our public adjuster, so his name's Jared Watson. He's actually in Corpus, so he's Texas based, but he can work all over the country and he's incredible. This is a secret that people kept from me. I'm convinced of this, right? Because I had a deal where we had a unit that had smoke damage. And so, the resident had to move out, whatever. And we filed a claim with insurance and they denied the claim, just like flat out denied it.
They actually denied it. Okay.
Yeah. This is in Florida too, by the way.
Yeah,
so it's like, they just denied it. Yeah. They were just like, no. And we were like, what do you mean? No, that's not how this works. Like, yes. And they're like, no, there's some exclusion of coverage, blah, 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 whatever. And we're like, okay. I'm like, what do I do? And I had to go to people I knew and hope that they would just help me because I had enough of a relationship with them, not because we were in a mastermind together or in a coaching group or whatever, right? So anyway, one of my friends introduces me to Jared Watson. And so I call Jared up and, the name of his company is Peril Adjusters. And I'm like, this is a weird name. Like, what does a peril adjuster do? Like, I didn't know. I thought adjusters only worked for insurance companies. So I called Jared and I'm like, hi, I'm Veena. So-and-so introduced us, whatever. This is what happened. He's like, okay, let me look at it. He looks at the file, looks at the denied claim, and he sends an email to the insurance company, to the adjuster that denied us. He's like, I need all the records, blah, 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 everything. He's like, starting to use all these fancy words that I still to this day don't know. And the adjuster gives him a response. And he's like, okay, I'm going to meet you out there next week. He gets on a plane, flies to my asset. I have not even seen the damage because I'm in Dallas. He flies to the asset with the public adjuster, walks it. The adjuster goes, okay, you're right. We are going to accept the claim.
Love it.
But we're only going to give you $25,000 for it. And we're like, okay, this seems like it. I don't know if that's what it's going to cost, but it seems similar to what it'll cost. We go and we say, hey, Jared, whatever you think needs to be done, go do it. We think we can probably get it fixed, like whatever. He's like, no, this is not enough. And we're like, okay, we don't really know what it's going to entail. Ultimately, we got that claim up to $78,000.
Love it.
From zero. And it doesn't cost you anything out of pocket, right? The adjuster takes a percentage of what the adjustment is.
Yep.
And I'm like, why didn't we do this on every other claim that we had before? And now we use him so much. We actually have him look at our policy, our full jacket before we bind a policy so that we know what's in there. Because now insurance companies are starting to add these like little clauses, like there's something about litigating in New Jersey or something where it's very, very insurance friendly.
Right.
And so those are things you just don't know until you do, or you have the right power team to help you. So that was a mistake I made early on, is not knowing I needed those people.
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, because a lot of people that, have real estate or even homes in coastal communities don't realize that most policies will not insure or provide coverage if the water damage comes up through the floor.
Yeah.
So if you live in an area that has hurricanes or is, prone to flooding, you need flood coverage, which is a separate policy. In addition, of course, to your homeowners or your property.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not aware of that, but it's funny because, we had an incident that actually happened on our personal home where we had a broken pipe under the slab. And so I called a company that came out. We're ripping out sheetrock, tearing up the floor, basically remediation. And I called, of course, our insurance company, and it was during COVID. So this is funny. She says, well, because of COVID, I cannot actually come out as an adjuster and actually take a look at the property to figure out what the claim should actually be valued at. And I said, well, how are we going to deal with this? I mean, I can send you pictures. She said, no, we have relationships with local contractors that'll come out as our eyes and ears. So the next day, this little 28, 30-year-old kid shows up on camera. He's not an adjuster. He's just taking pictures. He does not have any probes. He's not taking any moisture readings in any of the walls or anything like that. And 2 days later, I get a call from the adjuster. She said, Mr. Blazar, we've settled your claim. We're sending you a check for $21,000.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing hysterically, like, where did you come up with that number? And she's like, well, that's the damage. This contractor that came through. I'm like, this is going to be closer to $95,000 by the time we're done. She's like, how did you come up with that? And I'm like, well, I'm a professional real estate investor. I professionally renovated over 20 properties. And today I own, a large portfolio of multifamily. I know what construction costs are.
Yeah.
So anyway, like you, we finally got a public adjuster. Public adjuster came out, sent her a letter, did all the stuff, took what we call a Matterport, which is a camera that rotates 3D imagery, sent that. We went from 20 now to $60,000. But I had estimates from remodelers, it was still $88,000. So we're still 20 short. Here's a lesson for a lot of people. Many people do not know this. You can actually force your insurance company to what we call arbitration.
Yes.
You get an adjuster, you have your adjuster, and then there is a third party, which is another adjuster. If two of those three agree, the insurance company is now bound to pay out the amount that's agreed upon. Well, what she didn't know is my next door neighbor was a public adjuster. So he called a buddy of his who's also an unbiased adjuster. We finally got $88,000
for you.
Claim. Took him from 20. Now, here's a funny story. About 9 months later, we had a massive tree limb fall from one of our big pecan trees, just randomly. I mean, no storm, no lightning.
Yeah.
It was actually a condition with a larger trees called summer drop, where they just drop massive branches. They have no idea. They just think it might be stress, the limbs or the roots. So I called the insurance company and I said, it's Mr. Blazar again. We got another claim. What happened? I said, well, big, massive branch came down on the garage roof, which is adjacent to the house, did some damage. I said, you want to go through the same process, or you just want to go ahead and send me a check for the estimate? She said, we're not going to go to the mat with you again. we went down that route. So, once you establish the precedence with an insurance company, they get to know that you're going to go to the mat with them.
They do.
To get your claims paid and push through much quicker. But I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people just acquiesce. And they sit back and they settle for a much lesser amount. During Hurricane Harvey here in Texas, unfortunately, A lot of people had to dig into retirement accounts to make themselves whole. That's not the things you need to do, folks. Like Veena said, and like I said, know your rights, get a public adjuster and fight, because most insurance companies do not want to pay out what you're entitled to receive. And that's a really, really great lesson here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, your approach to raising capital. You've obviously done quite well. You've got a network of phenomenal investors that just rant and rave and fund your deals. If you could go about the process of building your investor database, or maybe doing things a bit differently, would you go back and maybe approach your capital raising in a different manner?
Totally. I would have implemented processes and systems way earlier on. I did not do that because I thought I could remember everybody that invested into our deals, which you can when you have 20 investors. You can't when you have 2,000 investors, right? And so it's much harder to get to scale without systems and processes, and you need the systems and processes before you actually need them.
Yes.
You have to implement them before you actually realize you need them. It's too late by then. So I guess like the theme of everything I'm saying is like, it comes sooner than you think. Before you think you need it is when you actually really need these things.
Yeah.
I also would have implemented getting to know investor referrals much sooner. So anytime I have a positive interaction with investors, I always ask for a referral from them, because a lot of times they have friends and family that want to be in these types of deals too. And if you don't ask them about it, they may or may not tell you about it. So always ask for those referrals. I wish we had. We hired an investor coordinator who is phenomenal, and part of his major job function is to make sure that investors feel like they are getting white glove service.
Yes.
And we're always looking at ways to improve that. Every single thing we do at our company, and I really mean everything, like down to the colors that we used on our brand refresh, are based on how does this affect the investor returns, investor experience, investor ethos of the deal. We also spend a lot of time arguing with all the vendors we work with if they add any friction to our process. I want to be like the Chanel of real estate investing, right? Like I want it to be luxurious and high end and exclusive. And I want people to feel like they are getting a true experience when they're investing with us.
Yeah, one thing that I think you were leading to as you were talking about the colors and the feel and everything is how important is what I call brand when it comes to raising capital.
So important. So important. Listen, and I firmly believe at our company, how we do little things is how we do everything.
Yes.
And when I'm investing, because I'm an LP in deals, if I'm investing with somebody who I can't see anything about them, they have nothing professional, they're sloppy, they make mistakes on the lowest hanging of fruit, I'm like, you don't really want to build a relationship with me. You might be closed tomorrow. I need you to be operational for at least the next 5 or 7 years or whatever the investment horizon is, right? So so much so that I put out a mini course, like a workshop called Building Your Brand, because there's so many things that I didn't know I should be thinking about until I'd already built my company. And I'm like, oh, I wish someone would have just given me like a checklist of everything to do. But it doesn't really exist out there where you can just go out and you can say like, okay, yes, name, this is how I find the name. This is how I look for the trademark. This is how I establish the entity. Like all of those things are things you have to really think through, and you have to think through them at the beginning, not once you're years and years into this or months and months into this, because it's very expensive to refresh a brand. Trust me, I did it. It's very expensive and time consuming to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I learned many years ago from a gentleman by the name of Joe Williams. Joe Williams was actually the founder of Post Properties, which ultimately became the #1 operator for multifamily across the United States. He passed away, but his company, Preferred Apartments, still survives him in Atlanta. Him and another gentleman that I worked for raising a couple $100 million, Michael Schwartz with Smart Stop Asset Management. Michael had built a pretty nice portfolio, about 350, 400 million in self-storage assets throughout the United States, and now wanted to create liquidity for his investors. And so he just wanted to sell the whole portfolio. And so he went to market, and within a couple of weeks, he got a call from one of his major competitors. It was CubeSmart. And they said, hey, we heard that you're in the market for a sale. We'd like to entertain making an offer. So they flew him up. They're there in a big conference room, doing the dog and pony show, going through the property portfolio, yada, yada. And shortly thereafter, they called him and they made an offer. It was $900 million cash.
Yeah. Because
Now,
he had a brand.
As a fiduciary, he's doing the happy dance, but he said, look, I got a board of directors, I got investors, I really got to think through this. Very shortly thereafter, one of the larger operators, Extra Space, called, heard he was in the market. They flew him up, they did the same thing. And the offer he received now was $1.4 billion.
Yep.
Now,
I remember this story.
He's like, if this was $10-20 million, I probably would not be losing sleep. But what did they see in the value of my portfolio that this other company obviously overlooked? And so he just asked him, he said, just out of curiosity, we're entertaining other offers, but what do you guys see in the value of the real estate? The response he got blew him away. They said, Michael, we're not buying the portfolio of real estate. What we're buying is the brand and everything that brand and that name SmartStop, the smarter place to store, stands for in the storage industry. And he realized that a branded real estate portfolio will add a premium upon your exit and upon your sale. And so to hear that you want to be the Chanel in the multifamily space, man, that's your brand.
Yes, that's the brand.
Skill that you give your investors, but more importantly, also your tenants.
Yes.
It's the quality of the property, the landscaping, how they feel when they come into the office space or, of course, into the clubhouse. You have properties, which I assume you do, that have those larger amenities, but it's the brand.
Yeah, it's all about the brand.
Yep, in the capital raising space.
Yes.
Well, let's wrap up. How can people reach out to you? You mentioned, of course, you had your Facebook community.
Yes. I hang out in the Facebook community often, probably more than I should for operating a full-time business, but those are my people. I love hanging out there. I love interacting with everyone, getting to know everybody. So it's Mastering Multifamily with Veena Jetti. I also am on all the social media as Veena Jetti, VEENAJETTI. But if you want to passively invest, you can go to my website, vivefunds.com, VIVEFUNDS.com. And I have an investor portal. You can log in, you can see whatever our offerings are, and ask any questions you have of us. But I'd be happy to have you in any part of my ecosystem.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll have to get you to speak at one of our boot camps. Yes. This has been a great episode, everybody. If you're not a subscriber, if you're not a follower, make sure you click the little button below the podcast as you're listening. Become a subscriber. This is all about learning how to attract and raise capital, how to do something bigger in life, how to network and find investors just like myself and Veena has. This is Brad Blazar. Thank you so much for being a listener. And Veena, more importantly, thank you so much for being a great guest today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I loved this topic.
You've been listening to the Capital Catalyst Show with Brad Blazar. The best place for entrepreneurs interested in doing something big in life, having considerably less stress, and a more balanced life. Go to bradblazar.com for more ways to accelerate your success.